I was hiding in the corner of my own garage, holding my phone with shaking hands, recording everything. My husband didn't know I was there. He was on the floor beside my car with a wrench, and a woman I had never seen before knelt next to him. She opened a small metal kit and pointed at my brake line. "Cut it deeper this time," she said. "Last time didn't kill her." My husband nodded like it was nothing. "I thought she would die in the first crash," he said. "She should have died." My whole body went cold. They weren't talking about a mistake. They weren't talking about an accident. They were talking about killing me. The woman leaned closer to the car. "Once she drives tonight, the brakes will fail. Quick and clean." "Good," my husband replied. "She won't survive this one." I covered my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. If they heard me, even one breath, I knew I'd die right there in that garage. At that moment, one truth hit me harder than anything. My husband was trying to murder me. And this wasn't the first time. Let me tell you how all of this started. I woke up in the hospital room. My eyes were half open, but I didn't move. I couldn't. 7 days in a coma had turned my body into something heavy, foreign, unreachable. I didn't know how long I had been awake, 5 minutes, maybe 10, when the door to my room opened quietly. I shut my eyes again out of instinct. My breathing slowed until it was almost invisible. I heard footsteps. Slow, cautious ones. Then a familiar voice. My husband. For a moment, I felt safe. The nurses had told me he came every day, held my hand, cried. He told everyone he couldn't live without me. I wanted to call out to him in that moment, to tell him I was back, alive, awake. But then his phone rang. And his entire voice changed. He stepped closer to my bed, but he didn't touch me. He didn't even look at me. His tone shifted from worried husband to someone, calculating and cold. "Yeah," he whispered sharply, "I'm here now." "No, she hasn't woken up yet. The doctors think it might be days. Maybe weeks." He paused. I felt the air thicken. Then he said the words that froze my blood. "It's better if she doesn't wake up at all. Everything will go smoothly that way." My heart stopped. I felt it. I actually felt it stumble in my chest. He kept talking, low, controlled, careful. "Yes. The accident was clean. Nobody suspects anything. As long as she stays like this, everything falls into place." Everything falls into place. I lay there motionless, forcing myself not to react, not to breathe faster, not to tremble. I couldn't let him know I heard anything. I couldn't even swallow the lump sitting like a stone in my throat. A soft beep from one of the machines startled him. He stepped back instantly. "I'll call you later," he whispered, and the call ended. He stood by my bedside for a moment. I felt him watching me, or checking me. I don't know. Then he turned and left. The door closed. Only then did I let air back into my lungs. In that room, surrounded by machines meant to save my life, I realized the person who should have loved me the most was hoping I'd die. And from that moment on, I knew I needed to pretend. I needed to stay quiet. Because waking up was only the beginning, and surviving him would be the real challenge. If you're still here with me, tell me where you're listening from. I'd love to know how far this story has traveled. Now back to the story. For the next 2 days in the hospital, I pretended to drift in and out of consciousness. I let nurses clean me, feed me, talk to me like I was fragile glass. I even let my husband hold my hand once, just so he wouldn't suspect that I knew. Every time he touched me, my skin crawled, but I forced myself to stay still. He played the role of devoted husband perfectly. Too perfectly. He brought flowers, wiped my forehead, asked every nurse about my progress. From the outside, he looked like the man every woman prayed for. But his voice from that phone call kept replaying in my mind like a nightmare on loop. "It's better if she never wakes up." When the nurses stepped out, he would check my machines. Too closely. Almost like he was memorizing the readings. Once I felt him slip something into his pocket. I couldn't see what it was, but I recognized the sound. It was the rustle of one of my medical charts. He wasn't caring for me. He was monitoring me. By the time the doctors finally declared me stable enough to be discharged, I already knew what I was going to do. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I needed to stay alive long enough to understand why the man I loved wanted me dead. I returned home 2 weeks later, moving slowly, pretending the fatigue was worse than it was. He fussed over me like a trained actor. He made soup, adjusted pillows behind my back, offered to help me shower, which I refused immediately. He laughed softly, as if embarrassed. But I saw the tension behind his smile. He wasn't embarrassed. He was irritated. My weakness inconvenienced him. That first night home, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, replaying our entire marriage like a movie I needed to rewatch for clues. We met 5 years ago at a charity event. Back then, I remembered thinking he felt like stability wrapped in kindness. He brought me water, asked if I had eaten, laughed at all my jokes. But tonight, replaying the memory in my mind, the edges looked different, sharper, colder. I realized he hadn't approached me because he was drawn to me. He approached me because he had already studied me. I wasn't a woman he fell for. I was a target he selected. And suddenly, every moment that used to feel magical now felt manufactured. I was already building my tech company, still in the early days, hungry, ambitious, working 16-hour days. He was warm, attentive, supportive. I mistook attention for love. I mistook good timing for chemistry. When my company took off, he cheered louder than anyone. Or so I thought. But in hindsight, I realized something important. The more successful I became, the more he guided me into giving him control of small things. First, he helped with errands. Then taxes. Then meetings. Then my schedule. Then my safety. It wasn't protection. It was positioning. By year 3 of our marriage, he knew everything. Passwords, investments, assets, properties. I didn't think twice. When you love someone, you don't assume they're studying you like a blueprint. The accident, the one that broke my ribs and put me in a coma, happened at a time when my company was preparing for a major acquisition. Tens of millions were about to shift hands. I was the majority shareholder. If I died, everything would automatically transfer to him. And suddenly, the phrase he said on the phone made sense in a way that twisted my stomach. Everything falls into place. After I returned to work, I kept a calm face. My employees hugged me, cried, welcomed me back. But underneath, fear chewed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me. That every step was being monitored. I told no one. Not my best friend. Not my assistant. Not my lawyer. The more people knew, the more danger I invited. Instead, I began paying attention, truly paying attention, for the first time. I noticed small things. My husband's new habit of leaving home at night. Quick phone calls he took on the balcony. Documents he hid in his briefcase. His sudden interest in my financial meetings. He wasn't just waiting for me to die. He was planning something. Something ongoing. And deep down, a cold truth settled into my bones. The accident wasn't an accident. One evening, 2 weeks after returning home, I made my decision. I waited until he fell asleep beside me, breathing softly, peacefully, like an innocent man. And I whispered into the darkness, not for him, but for myself. Tomorrow, I find out exactly who I married. That night was the first time I was more afraid of the man lying next to me than the accident that almost killed me. Lying beside him felt like sharing a bed with a loaded weapon. Every rise and fall of his chest sounded too calm, too steady, the breathing of a man who thought he was winning. Meanwhile, I kept my eyes half open, terrified that if I truly fell asleep, I would never wake up again. I could feel his warmth beside me, but it didn't comfort me. It suffocated me. I had never felt more unsafe in my own home, in my own marriage, in my own skin. And it was only the beginning. The next morning, I didn't go directly to my office. Instead, I drove to a mechanic shop owned by an old family friend, a man who had worked on my cars since I was 22. He had known me through my broke years, my startup years, and the years I finally built myself into someone. When he saw me walk in, he froze. "Jesus, you're supposed to be in the hospital." "I'm fine," I lied. "I need you to check something for me." Quietly. I handed him photos of my damaged car, the twisted metal, the crushed hood, the shattered windshield. He studied them in silence, zooming in, pinching the screen, frowning harder each minute. Then he looked at me, his face pale. "Whoever did this didn't want you injured," he whispered. "They wanted you gone." Your brake line wasn't cut, it was drilled. Clean. Professional. A cold wave washed over me. Professional. Someone had planned my death with precision. Someone who knew my routine. Someone who needed me gone. I thanked him and walked out before he could ask more questions. My hands shook the entire drive to work. When I reached my office, I tried to breathe normally, smile normally, walk normally. But inside, something had cracked. I sat at my desk and opened the company accounts, something I hadn't personally examined in months because I trusted my husband to handle the house paperwork while I handled the business. If you love stories of betrayal, hidden truths, and justice that strikes when no one expects it, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. New stories drop every day, each one darker, sharper, and more unforgettable than the last. Now back to the story. Trust. What a stupid, naive word. Within 5 minutes, I saw the first discrepancy. Then another. Then 10 more. Money was missing. Small amounts at first, tiny enough to slip under the radar. $3,000 here, $7,500 there. But there was something else buried inside the statements, something that didn't match the cold, methodical pattern of theft. Several payments were outgoing, not incoming. High-interest debts. Quiet loan repayments. Old medical bills that weren't his. Someone had been squeezing him long before he started squeezing me. And the dates, they lined up perfectly with when he began acting distant months ago. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was drowning in something I wasn't supposed to find out. But as I checked the dates, the pattern became obvious. The amounts increased. Then multiplied. $20,000. $46,000. $102,000. Transferred to a shell corporation with a name that made my stomach twist, LR Consulting Holdings. LR. 2 letters. 2 letters that would soon become nightmares. The address attached to the shell company wasn't local. It wasn't even in our state. It was a P.O. box in Nevada, a very specific city known for untraceable corporate entities. But that wasn't the worst part. Not by a long shot. The worst part was the date of the first transfer. 8 months ago. 8 months before the accident. 8 months before my coma. 8 months before he whispered over my hospital bed that his life would be easier if I never woke up. I printed the records, slid them into a folder, locked the folder in my desk drawer, and sat back. My husband had been siphoning my money long before the attempt on my life. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was long-term planning. This was strategy. And I wasn't even close to uncovering everything. That evening when I returned home, I pretended to be exhausted, which wasn't hard. My body felt like it had aged 10 years from stress alone. My husband greeted me with fake concern. "You should be resting more," he said softly, kissing my forehead. "Work calms me," I said, smiling weakly. He smiled back. But his eyes were calculating. Earlier that afternoon, I almost slipped. When he asked me what day of the week it was, I instinctively answered without thinking, too quickly, too confidently. His eyes sharpened immediately, scanning my face like a machine detecting errors. I quickly faked a wince, pressing my fingers to my temple as if the answer had hurt. He watched me for a full 5 seconds. Silent. Suspicious. I held my breath until he finally looked away. That moment taught me something. One wrong reaction, one wrong blink, could get me killed. Later, when he went to shower, I heard the faint sound of his phone vibrating in the bedroom. I walked quietly toward it. I knew better than to touch it. He had sensors, locks, face recognition. But I leaned over just enough to see the notification on the lock screen. A text message. From a number saved as LR. My blood ran cold. On schedule? That was the message. 2 simple words dripping with meaning. On schedule for what? My death? More withdrawals? Another accident? He stepped out of the bathroom right then. I moved instantly, pretending to look for my slippers under the bed. My heart beat so loudly I was sure he could hear it. He said nothing. Neither did I. But something shifted in that moment. The silence between us wasn't marital distance. It was war. 3 days later, everything exploded. I returned home earlier than usual because a meeting got cancelled. I parked quietly in the driveway. At first, The house looked normal, peaceful. But as soon as I opened the front door, I heard it. His voice. Low, tense, urgent. He was in the living room, speaking on speakerphone. "I already told you," he hissed. "The doctors think she's still weak. Her memory is foggy. She barely functions. No, she has no idea. The first attempt almost worked. We just need patience." My knees buckled. I pressed my back against the wall, listening. Then the other voice came through the speaker, a woman's voice, calm and emotionless. "We don't have time. You said you'd clear the inheritance paperwork by now. If she recovers too fast, she'll ruin everything." My breath caught. This was not an affair. This was business. Deadly business. He responded quickly, irritated. "I'm handling it. But we need her out of the picture before the acquisition. Once she's gone, everything transfers automatically. After that, we disappear." Disappear. He planned to run. With her. With my money. After killing me. In that moment, the truth settled like a knife against my spine. My husband hadn't betrayed me out of anger, or disappointment, or distance. He had betrayed me because killing me was part of his business plan. And now I knew their timeline. Their urgency. Their next steps. But they didn't know something far more dangerous. I was already steps ahead of them. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside my husband, staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly, breathing like a man who believed the world was folding neatly into his palms. Every rise of his chest filled me with a mixture of disgust and resolve. I kept replaying that call in my mind, his tone, the woman's voice, the words before she recovers too fast. They were running out of time. But so was I. By sunrise, I had a plan. Not a perfect one, not a safe one, but a plan built on one unbreakable truth. If I waited for justice to protect me, I'd die before it arrived. I needed to gather evidence. Real evidence. Not suspicions or screenshots or half-heard phone calls. Evidence that couldn't be explained away. So, I began acting. Pretending to be weak drained me in ways the coma never did. Every movement had to be calculated, not too quick, not too sharp, not too normal. My muscles screamed from holding back their real strength. My mind ached from pretending to be foggy. Sometimes I caught myself almost standing too straight or answering too clearly, and I had to pull myself back into character. It felt like living inside an invisible cage, one he couldn't see but I couldn't escape. Every second required discipline. Every breath required acting. At breakfast, I exaggerated every weakness. I forgot simple words, mixed up dates, moved slower, leaned heavily on chairs as though my legs were still unreliable. My husband watched me closely, almost too closely. He was studying me, evaluating how much time he had left. And he liked what he saw. I could tell by the subtle softening in his posture, the almost relieved exhale he tried to hide behind his coffee mug. Good. Let him think I was still damaged. Let him underestimate me. When he left for the day, I waited exactly 15 minutes, long enough for him to be safely out of the neighborhood. Then I called a private investigator. Not from my phone. Not from my office. I drove to a pharmacy in another town and used their public booth. Discretion? The PI repeated on the phone, his tone slow. I guarantee it. What do you need? Information, I said. On a corporation. And on 2 people. What kind of information? The kind that keeps me alive. There was a long pause before he answered, I'll take the case. We met 2 hours later in a small cafe, the kind where the servers don't look too hard at faces. I slid papers, photos, account printouts across the table. He read without speaking. His expression shifted from neutral to uneasy. This isn't amateur work, he finally muttered. Your husband isn't just stealing from you. He's building something. Something big. I know, I whispered. I just need the missing pieces. He nodded slowly. I'll get you everything. But whatever this is, protect yourself. These people don't make mistakes. I left with my hands trembling. For the next 3 days, I played my role perfectly. I acted confused, slow, tired. I let my husband guide me, help me, feed me lies with that gentle voice he thought I still trusted. But when he left the house, I worked. I gathered financial records. I copied emails. I recorded every conversation we had, even the innocent ones. Especially the innocent ones. Because sometimes innocence reveals more truth than guilt. On the evening of the 4th day, the PI called me. His voice was tense. His voice wasn't just tense, it was shaken. "Before you come," he said, lowering his tone, "you need to know something. Someone else has been following you." I froze. "Not me," he added quickly. "Not the woman. A third person. Different car, different timing, different patterns." My throat tightened. "How long?" I whispered. "At least a week," he said. "And whoever it is, they're not working alone." My mind raced as he continued, "Your husband wasn't planning this with just one partner. We need to meet. Tonight." My stomach dropped. "Is it bad?" "It's worse than you think." I met him in the back of his small office, blinds drawn, lights dim. He closed the door behind me and placed 2 files on the desk. "Your husband's shell company, LR Consulting Holdings?" The LR stands for Luciana Rivas. I frowned. "Who is that?" He opened the file. A photo lay on top. A woman in her 40s. Sharp eyes. No smile. Precise posture. "A hired operative," he said bluntly. "Not a mistress. Not an accountant." But as he flipped to the next page, my stomach knotted. There was an old photograph clipped to her file, Luciana standing beside a man at a security training seminar almost 9 years ago. The man beside her was my husband. Younger. Cleaner jawline. Same smile. Same posture. They had known each other long before he met me. The PI tapped the photo. "They didn't just meet for this job," he murmured. "This is someone he trusted long before you ever entered the picture." And in that moment, the betrayal cut deeper. It wasn't a new alliance. It was an old one, waiting to be activated. She specializes in staged accidents, identity wipes, and clean exits. She's been linked to 3 cases that were ruled accidental deaths. My heart crawled into my throat. "She's the one he's been talking to?" He nodded. "And the payments your husband has been making? They're not just for her services. They're building an escape package, new identities, offshore accounts, liquidation plans." I felt my whole body go numb. "Are you telling me he's planning to disappear after I'm dead?" "Yes," he said quietly. "And you need to hear the rest." He opened the second file. Bank accounts. Travel itineraries. Insurance documents. And then, the final blow. A signed request for emergency transfer of my assets to my husband in the event I became mentally unfit to operate my company. Dated 3 months before the accident. Signed by someone pretending to be me. I stared at the papers, shock draining every ounce of warmth from my body. He forged my signature. "He's been preparing this for a long time," the PI said. "Your accident wasn't an impulsive move. It was the final step in a plan he's been constructing for nearly a year." I closed the folder with shaking hands. "I have enough to expose him," I whispered. "No," the PI said firmly. "Not yet. Because they're planning another attempt. And this time, you need to catch them in the act." I looked up slowly. "You want me to set a trap?" "No," he corrected. "I want you to survive one." As I drove home that night, the streets looked different. The world looked different. I no longer felt scared. I felt sharp, clear, awake in a way I hadn't been in years. My husband thought I was slipping away, losing myself, growing weaker. But he was wrong. I was coming back to life. And this time, I was ready. The PI's warning replayed in my mind for days. They're planning another attempt. It echoed in every room of my house, in every quiet moment, in every breath I took near the man who wanted me gone. But I didn't panic. I strategized. If they needed another accident, then I would give them the opportunity they were waiting for, one I controlled. One they couldn't twist in their favor. So I created the perfect scenario. A fake business trip. A remote drive. Nighttime. Bad lighting. Bad weather forecast. And me supposedly still fragile, still forgetful, still recovering, behind the wheel of a car. I planted the idea casually over dinner, stirring my soup slowly, letting my hand tremble just enough. "I think it might help me, To go back to the retreat facility. Clear my mind a bit. He froze. Just for a split second. But I saw it, the flick of shock in his eyes, the momentary stiffness in his fingers. Then he smiled. Soft. Sympathetic. Loving. Fake. Honey, if you think that will help, maybe it's a good idea. He was agreeing too easily. Too fast. And inside, the smallest flame of satisfaction lit up. He believed me. Completely. Perfect. I told him I'd drive since I needed to regain confidence. He hesitated. Another tiny flicker I caught like a hawk. But he masked it instantly. Of course. I'll help you pack. The trap had been set. The day I planned to leave, the PI and 2 officers specializing in financial crimes and homicide conspiracies waited 2 blocks away with surveillance gear, cameras, and a warrant ready to be signed if evidence matched my claims. I gave the officers a spare key to the car and a tracking device for the underside. We checked the brakes that morning, everything perfect. Brand new. Untouched. And then, I went home and pretended to rest before my trip. My husband hovered. Too much. He kept glancing at the clock. At me. At the keys on the counter. Then back at the clock. Like someone waiting for a delivery. Or an accomplice. By 7 p.m., I stood by the door with my purse, dressed warmly, keys in hand. He kissed my forehead. Drive safe, okay? I fought the urge to recoil. I will. I stepped outside and waited. Counted. 5, 10, 15. At exactly 20 minutes, the moment the PI predicted, my husband left the house. Not by the front door, but by the garage exit. He didn't drive. He walked. Fast. I stayed hidden behind a neighbor's tall hedges, breath held. Then I saw her. Luciana Rivas. LR. The woman whose voice had haunted my nightmares. She walked up the street like she belonged there. Dressed in black, hair tied up, no makeup, a ghost with a mission. My husband met her halfway. They didn't hug. Didn't touch. They talked with quick, clipped gestures, scanning the area with trained eyes. The PI was already recording everything from a van nearby. I watched as Luciana pulled something from her jacket, a small kit, compact, metallic. My husband pointed toward the driveway. Toward my car. Toward my death. They slipped in through the side entrance. The garage light flicked on. This was it. The moment everything would break open. My PI whispered into my earpiece, "Get ready. We need visual confirmation of tampering." I whispered back, "I'm moving." I walked silently down the driveway, keeping to the shadows, phone recording. Inside the garage, the 2 of them crouched by my car's underside. Tools out. Metal scraping. Rubber tearing. Fluid dripping. Luciana's voice was flat, cut deeper this time. Last attempt wasn't enough. My husband growled softly, "I thought she'd die on impact." She should have died. My breath stilled. Even after everything, hearing him say it again nearly shattered me. The PI and 2 officers approached from behind me, their steps coordinated and quiet. They spread out, waiting for my signal. I stepped forward, just enough to let the garage light hit my face. "Don't stop on my behalf," I said. Both of them froze. My husband's wrench clattered to the floor. Luciana whipped around, eyes narrowing like a predator caught mid-hunt. He stuttered. "Honey, you're supposed to be on the road." "Why?" I asked softly. "So you could identify the body later?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Behind me, 3 officers stepped forward, badges raised. "Step away from the vehicle." Luciana immediately reached for her kit, but she wasn't fast enough. 2 officers grabbed her arms, pinning her to the floor. She spat curses like venom, kicking, resisting, her calm facade gone. My husband backed away, face white as a ghost. I can explain, this isn't, I'm being framed." I walked toward him slowly. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel fragile. Or scared. I felt powerful. "You lied," I whispered. "You stole from me. You tried to kill me. Twice." His voice cracked. "You were supposed to stay in the coma. You weren't supposed to wake up." He stopped himself too late. The officers seized him. He didn't fight. He collapsed under his own guilt. As they dragged him toward the police car, he twisted back with pure desperation in his eyes, the eyes of a man who finally understood he lost everything. Please. Please wait. We can fix this. Fix. I repeated. You tried to erase me. He screamed after me as the officers shoved him inside the car. You were supposed to die. I stood there, breathing evenly, heartbeat steady, the complete opposite of the woman who woke up from a coma terrified and confused. The night my husband was arrested, the house felt different. Quieter. Not the comforting kind of quiet, no. It was the quiet of something poisonous finally being drained out of the walls. For weeks, I had lived inside a nightmare with eyes open, pretending to sleep, pretending to trust, pretending to love a man who was counting down the days until my death. Now he was gone. And for the first time since waking up from that coma, I could finally breathe without fear. That night, I walked through every room of the house, slow, deliberate steps echoing against the walls. The silence felt different now, not sharp and suffocating, but strangely soft. I touched the doorway where he used to greet me, the kitchen counter where he kissed my forehead, the bed where I once lay beside a man planning my death. And it hit me, freedom doesn't always feel victorious at first. Sometimes it feels like grieving a life you thought you had. I stood there in the quiet and let myself finally feel everything I had survived. The officers told me I might experience shock, panic, confusion. But instead, something unexpected settled over me, a peace so deep it almost made me dizzy. A peace that tasted like freedom. The days that followed were a blur of statements, interviews, evidence transfers, and court preparations. My PI stayed by my side through all of it. The officers told me the recordings and footage were more than enough to secure charges for attempted murder, conspiracy, grand theft, insurance fraud, and identity forgery. My husband's lawyer tried to reach out to me. He tried to paint his client as emotionally distressed and pressured by circumstances. I hung up the moment I heard his voice. There are some wounds you don't soothe. You let them scar so you never forget what cut you. Luciana Rivas, the woman he hired, refused to cooperate at first. But once she realized the police had traced her payments, her fake corporations, and her past jobs, she cracked. She confessed everything in exchange for a plea deal. Her confession confirmed the final truth I had already known deep in my bones. My accident wasn't an accident. It was a contract. And I had survived it by miracle and instinct alone. The court trial took months, but I attended every session. I sat straight. I wore my strength like armor. And I refused to let my eyes drop when he was escorted into the courtroom in handcuffs. He looked smaller, older, as if the truth had pulled all the life out of him. But as the guards pulled him toward the exit, he twisted back suddenly, his eyes hollow, wild, almost feral. "This isn't over," he mouthed. No sound. Just the shape of the words. A slow, deliberate threat only I was meant to see. It sent a cold ripple through me. Even in chains, even stripped of everything, he still wanted the last word. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying. Monsters don't disappear when justice arrives. They linger. They wait. They haunt the spaces they once controlled. Once, our eyes met, just for a second. He searched my face for the woman he had married, the woman he had once convinced me I was. But she was gone. She died the day he drilled through my brake line. The jury found him guilty on all major counts. After the verdict, the PI pulled me aside, his expression unusually troubled. "Just so you know," he murmured, "Luciana didn't give us everything. She admitted enough for the plea deal, but she held back something. Someone. A name she refused to say." He lowered his voice even more. "Your husband wasn't the mastermind. He was the middle link." My heart thudded once, painfully. "Is that person coming for me?" He hesitated, then answered, "Not yet." The yet stayed with me long after he walked away. He never looked at me again. After sentencing, the prosecutor pulled me aside and said something I'll never forget: "You saved your own life. Most people don't get that chance." If stories of betrayal and hidden truths keep you thinking long after they end, click the story showing on your screen now.